Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielson and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Lock Shop's Fantasy Football Extravaganza. And, boy, in some leagues, you might already be in playoff time. I'm in that Scott Fish Bowl, and we're in week 3 of the playoffs because it's like thousands of dudes, 1,600 guys or something. So it's like working its way down, and you're not doing head-to-head anymore. It's just like the top point getters move on and stuff. So I've managed to survive so far. Got myself Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown stack in the Scott Fish Bowl. So that worked out well this week, Huss. That worked out very well this week.
No doubt about it. Well, I'm in crunch time. I've had a good season in a few of my leagues, but the ones that I'm on the edge with, I mean, you know, there's a lot of teams that are 7-6. You're probably looking at a group of teams in most leagues that are 7-6 or 6-7, and it's going to come down to this final week to determine whether you're in or you're out. And as we were talking, I think yesterday at the end of the Lock Shop, kind of previewing this show today, I can't remember a final week of the regular season where so many teams were on the bye. There are 6 teams on the bye this week: Atlanta, Chicago, Green Bay, Indy, the Saints, and the Commanders. And there's a lot of fantasy relevant players on those teams.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, I'm in a situation with a really light bench in one league where I'm missing A.J. Dillon, Algier, and Antonio Gibson. And I'm basically, so there was a lot of scouring of the waiver wire and available players last night. And that might be a good place to start this week.
Well, yeah, because some of those injuries have opened the door for some guys that you can actually pick them and start a bye week. In my 16-team league up here, we start playoffs this week, which is tough because 12 teams at the 16 make the playoffs, so 4 teams get a bye, the other 8 play off. And this week in that league, and I'm not winning it this year. I tried to tank. I still made the playoffs, but I don't have Aaron Jones this week. I don't have Antonio Gibson this week, and I don't have Terry McLaurin this week. So I have to go. So both my running backs are gone. My only other running back is A.J. Dillon, who's also out. Although I do have Jerick McKinnon. So I'm going to have to play McKinnon this week, which I don't hate. I don't mind. We'll talk about McKinnon in a little bit. And then I'm going to have to pick somebody up off the waiver wire. But because I'm the lowest of the playoff teams, I do have top waiver wire priority. So we'll see what happens here over the next 12 hours to figure out exactly what's going on in that league. But yeah, these 6 buys this week seems strange to me. It's a killer. It's a killer in a lot of leagues, man.
Yeah. It is. It's crunch time for a lot, and I mean, we may as well start off with the waiver wire and get right into a couple running backs. And you know, there's a couple guys. One guy that's been actually quite active over the last few weeks that is surprisingly available in a number of leagues is James Cook from the Bills. He was a guy that was drafted in pretty much every league, but basically did nothing for the first part of the half season, and was famously benched, I think, was it the first game or the second game for the Bills? When he put the ball
fumbled like his first touch.
Yeah, that's right. So it took him a while to get the confidence back of at least of the coaching staff, but he's got that right now. He went for 14 carries for 64 yards last week and is being involved in the passing game a little bit more. So he's a guy that, you know, if he's available, listen, I mean, at this point, you're probably, if you're in a situation like I am in that one league, you're desperate enough just to be looking for a warm body that's going to see the football a few times. I mean, I don't even get picky about red zone opportunities and catches. Will the guy be on the field? Will he be getting the ball? And I think James Cook is absolutely one of those guys. So he was right at the top of the list. And then the other guy that, I'll be honest, I hadn't even heard of this dude up until basically, very recently, sometime over the course of the World Cup trip. It all just works into, you know, one long
Where'd this guy come from?
And night guitar. And what a name. Zonovan Knight. From
his nickname's Bam. Bam Knight.
He had 90 yards last week on 15 carries. They still have issues right now. Michael Carter's been out. James Robinson has been sort of held out, was a healthy scratch the other game, did not play very much last week. So it's been sort of Ty Johnson and Donovan Knight, Bam Knight. So, I mean, both of those guys probably more available in more than half of leagues. If you can get on those guys, I would jump on it. Kenyon Drake's another guy that, is available in a few leagues. He's done nothing over the course of the last few weeks, but he does have big playability. And I do think that with the injury to Lamar Jackson, at least short term in week 14, he probably will be seeing more balls and get more opportunities. So there's another guy for you. But I don't know where you're at on the running backs, Dusty, but it is scarce. And when you add in the buys, you just got to get a warm body that you think might see the football a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little scary. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And it depends on the depth of the league that you're in. I'm just looking right now at our listener league. And I mean, not to give away a bunch of these guys, but James Cook is available there. Kenyon Drake is available there. So there's a few guys that are kicking around. You probably have to dig a little bit deeper. DJ Dallas is an interesting one because so Kenneth Walker gets banged up. Then DJ Dallas got banged up. Then I think they brought in Tony Jones Jr. He got hurt worse, so DJ Dallas came back in to finish that game. And if Kenneth Walker can't go, I mean, I would assume it's a situation where Travis Homer, who's still kicking around there, kind of handles some third down stuff. But DJ Dallas gets the Carolina Panthers with the Seattle team that runs the ball pretty well. So that would be a guy that I would certainly look at. And then the other guy, and I've told you about Jerick McKinnon. Like, I've had him stashed all season in 2 leagues. I'm like, when things get a little bit more difficult, they will rely on Jerick McKinnon. Now, I need them to do that this week in that one league because it's a playoff game, but he's like 40% rostered, 50% rostered. And Huss, being the Chiefs fan, I know Pacheco's kind of taken over the primary back role, if you want to call it that, but they're mixing in Jerick McKinnon. I feel like they're just I feel like they're almost saving him to release him when it matters.
You know what? Listen, I think this is a great Jerick McKinnon week. I've got him starting in a couple leagues, as much out of necessity as anything, but you're right. I mean, he'll get carries. He'll also be involved in the passing game. And listen, as much as we've made jokes about the Broncos all season long and what an embarrassing season they've had, it sure as hell isn't on the backs of the defense. The Denver Broncos have one of the top-rated defenses right now in the league. And they are, even without Bradley Chubb, they're able to get to the quarterback. And I think that might make for a number of dump off and quick screens to Jerick McKinnon. So even more in a PPR league, his value goes up a little bit. But I'm with you right now. Pacheco's been pretty good lately, but certainly, I mean, he's not established enough that he's going to be a one-guy bell cow running back right now. Andy Reid trusts Jerick McKinnon, and so does Patrick Mahomes. Love him as a spot start this week in week 14 when a lot of guys need somebody to throw in the lineup.
Yeah, so in that league, I'll probably be starting Jerick McKinnon and DJ Dallas this week. So fingers crossed, season's on the line here, which is not ideal. So that's a running back picture, at least on waiver wires. Who else is jumping off the page for you here, Haas?
Well,
what else we got going on?
A couple receivers that I like, and this is a guy that has probably been added and dropped a number of times in leagues over the last couple of years. We remember him in Jacksonville, and now he's in Detroit, and it's DJ Chark. And Chark's had some really quiet weeks. But you've got the rookie, what's his last name, Crowder, coming back in. He'll be playing more slot role. And
Jameson Williams?
Or Jameson Williams.
You're thinking Jamison Crowder. Yeah, you're thinking Jamison Crowder.
Yeah. All the time.
Yeah.
He's a player that I think is going to, from what I'm reading, probably get more slot reps right now. And he barely played last week. Dan Campbell had him as a gunner on special teams.
So, classic Dan Campbell.
You got to learn to bite kneecaps before you can run on special teams for the rookie. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets involved a little bit more. But let's face it. First of all, the Lions offense has been really good. Jared Goff's chucking the football. And it's all about Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I mean, listen, Dusty, they're going up against the Vikings this week. The Vikings, despite their record, have one of the worst pass defenses in the entire National Football League. They're giving up, I believe they've given up the most receiving yards.
They're bottom 2, yeah.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, so, I mean, listen, they're giving up plenty in the air. And Listen, if you're a defensive coordinator, much like if you're going up against the Minnesota Vikings, you're going to try and do everything you can to take care of Justin Jefferson. Well, it's the exact same thing on the other side of the field with Amon-Ra St. Brown. And that, I think, is going to open up more opportunities for DJ Chark. Chark had 5 catches for 98 yards. So there's a big play aspect to his game as well. And I really do think he's going to see more targets with so much attention on St. Brown. So DJ Chark's a guy that you could definitely play in a flex spot if you're in a jam this week, or even at the receiver position. And the other guy that we've mentioned before, but I still see him on a number of waiver wires, is Josh Palmer, the Canadian with the Chargers. Now, I said last week was a real tough week for LA in that they were basically missing their entire offensive line. They basically had the practice squad out there protecting Justin Herbert. And man, Herbert gets done dirty with these injuries each and every year. Keenan Allen's back. Mike Williams isn't. The fact of the matter is that Josh Palmer has consistently been seeing a ton of footballs. He's had 10 or more targets in 3 of his last 5 games and had 11 targets last week. It would be nice if they gave Herbert more than a second and a half to throw the football so they could maybe get further down the field. But still, 7 catches last week, 60 yards, and again, 11 targets. So even if those guys come back, the chances of both Williams and Allen playing at the same time, or it's like, a Haley's Comet coming around. So I think Palmer is a guy that is going to see more and more looks from Herbert out of necessity. And I guess while I'm mentioning the Chargers offense, if you're stuck for a tight end and he's available, Jared Everett has really been productive. I think he got about 80 yards yesterday. Herbert's now going to the guys that are there and have been there right now, because you can't count on their $20 million receivers. And we know they're going to give up some points. They're going to be chucking the football. So I think both of those guys, but particularly Palmer and DJ Chark at the wide receiver position, could be nice ads both for this week and for the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, 2 other guys that I'd throw into the mix here. One of them's on a bye this week, so it doesn't help you much, but maybe a stash depending on your wide receiver position. Paris Campbell with the Colts. Coming out of that, he does get the Minnesota Vikings, who we mentioned, give up a ton of yards defensively. So that could be that'd be a playoff week in most leagues, right? So that might be a guy that you can flex. You might want to look at him. According to Fantasy Pros, he's 41% owned. And then this is a guy that in a 12-team league, I know I've had him in a couple leagues earlier in the year, dropped him a little bit. They continue to get thinner in some of the slot receiving areas. Mac Hollins, Raiders receiver. Obviously, it's basically a 2-man offense. It is Devontae Adams and it is Josh Jacobs. But with Waller out and then Foster Moreau now hurt as well, I mean, they've got to be able to throw the ball to somebody else somewhere on that team. And I think it's Mac Hollins. So I think that's a guy that you could probably flex this week on a bye week. I'm not buying into him long-term by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're hard up this week, like many of you will be, Hollins is a guy at the wide receiver position that you can certainly look at as well. I'll throw my one quarterback out there as well, and I stashed him last week. I have 2 leagues where I actually have Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields. So that does not help this week. And I was like, oh, crap. One of them was my big money league that I'm in up here. And I was like, what am I going to do? So last week I went to the waiver wire, got myself Jared Goff. And now I've got Jared Goff this week to start 50%. He's owned in 50% of leagues. He's at home. He's against a team that just gives up a ton of yards through the air. He's coming off a game in which he had 320 yards, was a start of the week right here last week on the Lock Shop's Fantasy Football Extravaganza. So if you're in buy hell with the quarterback situation this week and Jared Goff is there, you are a very lucky boy or girl being able to pick him up off the waiver wire right now.
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation in one of my leagues. I have Aaron Rodgers and Taylor Heineke both on the bye this week, and Goff's off the board. And the guy that I'm looking for a big bounce back performance this week that I'm on is Ryan Tannehill. And the schedule is also quite nice because they get the Jacksonville Jaguars at home this week. By the way, did you hear the Titans are going to win the AFC South again? They just fired their general manager this morning.
Did they? Did that just happen like the last hour? I didn't see it earlier today.
The last hour and a half, Rappaport and Tom.
That being said,
reporting it.
that And I had Pelissero on my show this morning. He didn't say that was going to go down, that bastard. That being said, bragging about winning that division, you know what I mean? Like, maybe you should be up by more in that division. But all right, so there you go. Any tight end? You mentioned Gerald Everett at tight end if he is available in your league. Tight end is just a position I hate so far this year. So yeah,
a few guys and then everybody else. And I mean, I had Dawson Knox last week. I thought he'd be good. 0. So, I mean, there's not much. And you know what? Actually, speaking of Tannehill, this might be a good little segue into the starts of the week because, I mean, listen, obviously, if you got Mahomes or one of the big guys, you're going with those guys. But Tannehill is sort of my low budget waiver wire or even low money DFS pick for start of the week. He had a really tough game against Philly. Of course, Treylon Burks got hurt as well. I do think that, they will listen. They'll look to get Derrick Henry going a little bit more as well. He only had about 30 yards in that game against Philly, but that just got bad. It went from bad to worse for the Titans. Nothing like the Jags defense to see a guy's production go up like this. So that's the time for me for Tannehill. Where are you going with your quarterback start?
Well, look, man, I don't want to go back to the same spot that I did last week. But I'm going to roll with Jared Goff once again against the Minnesota Vikings. It hit last week. I was like, I don't know, Goff or Lawrence, somebody in that game. And I decided to go with Goff. I called it a homer pick on the podcast. But it came through big time. Over 300 yards, couple of touchdowns, another juicy matchup against the Vikings. I said on my radio show yesterday, I think the Lions beat the Vikings this week. Vikings are 10-2. Lions are at home. And Huss, how about this? When I said that yesterday morning, our partners over at CoolBet, the Vikings were a 0.5-point favorite. When I looked yesterday, the Lions were a 1.5-point favorite. And I don't know, do you have it up right now? What's that spread at right now?
The Lions are 2.5-point favorites right now.
So it's moved 3 points in the last 24 hours.
The Vikes are 10-2. Playing the Detroit Lions, and they are plus 110 on the money line. I'm going to have to chew on that one before we get to the best bets on Friday's show, but I have a feeling we will be talking plenty about that game.
But just so quickly on Jared Goff I'm looking at DFS numbers right now. Jared Goff's 5,600. That's below Kirk Cousins by $500. It's below Trevor Lawrence, who gets Tennessee this week. And then, it's below Deshaun Watson, which is ridiculous at this point. So Jared Goff, great value play once again this week. And I could see him dropping another 300. Again, Goff has been... Dan Campbell said it after the game. He goes, I thought our quarterback played as good as a quarterback can play in that game. And Goff has done that a few times so far this year. So I'm all in on Goff 2 weeks in a row. Never thought I'd say that in my life when the Lions traded for him, but here we are.
There is a lot of steam going in. Well, listen, staying with the Lions and our starts of the week, I mean, we got to go Amon-Ra St. Brown against the Vikings. And we've talked about this Vikings pass defense. By the way, the total in that game is 53.5. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets up to like 55 by the time we start talking, because I think both of those teams score plenty of points in the dome there. But he basically cannot be stopped right now. Teams know that he's coming, much like Justin Jefferson. And listen, Jefferson obviously at the top of pretty much anyone's list on a weekly basis, but St. Brown has to be a top 5 option right now at wide receiver for fantasy. And this matchup against the Minnesota League, where his pass D is just perfect timing. So I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown for my wide receiver start. Running back start, Tony Pollard. I know Zeke gets the press. Tony Pollard is the guy that makes things happen. Another couple touchdowns in that runaway beatdown on Sunday Night Football. And they've got the Texans. By the way, Michael Gallup, I didn't mention him before because he's not available in many leagues, but if he is available in any of your leagues, grab them. The Cowboys' schedule through the fantasy playoffs might be the most advantageous, and obviously they've got Houston this week as well, so Gallup would be a nice pick, but I just think Tony Pollard is maybe still the most underrated guy. If Zeke wasn't there, we'd be talking about him as probably a top 5 running back.
That's a league winner if Zeke doesn't exist. Yeah,
for sure. And you know what? On the primetime game, they're going to give it to Zeke. They started off. It always ends up going back to Tony Pollard. He's more effective in both the running game and the passing game, gets into the end zone, and has been making a lot of owners very, very happy. And looking for maybe a sneaky tight end, I'm never much in on the Patriots offense, but we know how poor Arizona has been historically against tight ends.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't at all be surprised if Hunter Henry has a big game in the Arizona Patriots game this week. You can do a lot worse if you're just grabbing guys to play the tight end that's playing against Arizona every week. So Hunter Henry's another play of the week for me, and a guy you might want to throw into a DFS lineup as well if you're looking to save money elsewhere.
For me, I will say at the running back position, I was going to go with Tony Pollard until I clicked on your email and saw you had Tony Pollard. So it's just like, okay, let's go with Tony Pollard. I'll go with Ramondre Stevenson, New England Patriots. Same sort of thing going up against the Cardinals. Actually, I think that could be a pretty entertaining football game. I don't know exactly what happens, but I think both teams might be able to move the ball a little bit in that game. So I'm going to go with Ramondre Stevenson. And his involvement in the pass game while also being like their go-to back. Listen to this. This are his last 6 weeks worth of targets. 8, 7, 7, 6, 10, and 8. Those are good target numbers for a wide receiver, let alone a running back. So his involvement in the pass game has very much surprised me. So I'll go with Ramondre Stevenson as my start of the week at running back. I'm going to go back to that Arizona-New England game and throw DeAndre Hopkins in the mix as my start of the week at the wide receiver position. From a PPR perspective, I think his first 2 weeks, he was like 8th. And then he was 2nd the following week. The last 4 weeks, he's been a top 20 wide receiver, but he hasn't been up in that top 10, top 5 range. And obviously, since the moment he came back, Kyler Murray has had eyes for Hopkins and pretty much nobody else. So I like DeAndre Hopkins this week. And then at the tight end position, I mean, so hit and miss. I always like Freiermuth. He was okay last week. But look, I'll do it just to say in case it happened. TJ Hawkinson against the Detroit Lions with the Minnesota Vikings. Old classic back in Detroit revenge game. So make TJ Hawkinson your start of the week. But once again, I mean, if you don't have Travis Kelce, you really don't have a tight end at all. So, I hit who's the guy in Denver? Dolchich or whatever his name is? Started him in 2 leagues last week. And he actually, to have anybody with the Denver Broncos that has any sort of fantasy value right now, it might be that guy at the tight end position.
Russell Wilson, my God, what a killer. Of a season. I mean, I joked earlier, this could be as bad as the Herschel Walker trade. I think this is now the front runner for maybe the worst trade in NFL history. And when you think about where Seattle's going to be picking with Denver's first rounder, part of the reason why they had to trade Bradley Chubb to get a mid-round pick from the Miami Dolphins, because they knew they didn't have a first-round pick, and it was quite clear they had to turn this around. And don't forget the $200 million they still owe Russ for the. I've
completely sewered the organization with one move. Just for many organizations, it takes years to sewer the organization, but the Denver Broncos managed to do it overnight, which is rather incredible. So there you go. That's Week 14 preview episode of the Lock Shop's Fantasy Football Extravaganza. If you've been watching on Twitter, make sure you subscribe over to our YouTube channel. Within a few weeks here, all of our content will be over on the YouTube channel. We're over 350 subscribers now, so subscribe over there. One of our first 1,000 subscribers are going to win $1,000 cash straight up. So hop in on that right now as well. And of course, subscribe to the Lock Shop podcast on all your podcast platforms. And the Red Hot Huss will be back with some more picks tomorrow, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. I guess we're going to finish. We can maybe look ahead to the quarters of the World Cup, which is going to be
that'll be set.
We'll get into a little bit of hockey as well. And then see what we can do for Thursday night football. And then, of course, Friday, the big show when we get ready for the best bets. But good to be back. Good to be going. And yes, I did crack the top 20 on the Cool Bet leaderboard right now. Come and get me. And for those of you in the top 18 right now, I'm coming.
Talk to you tomorrow, man.